And we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 60th ever episode of the Best Phone Plans Podcast. Today, Dennis and I are joined by special guest Austin, who has Xfinity's legendary Gig Pro plan. And Austin, my understanding is you're actually one of 5 people in Pittsburgh who has this plan. Is that correct?
Yes, it's actually in Western PA. It's a huge geographical area. It's not just like Metro Pittsburgh. It's cut the state of Pennsylvania in half, and there's only 5 of us. I was number 3 to get it.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, before we dive into all of that, I think we'll talk about what your process was like for getting Gig Pro, how you're utilizing the service, if other people need it, and the insane speeds you're getting. First, I'd love to learn just a little bit about you, maybe what you're doing in context to this, and I guess maybe why you decided to sign up for Gig Pro.
So I started the process back before COVID actually hit. It's just because I knew it was going to take a little while to get. I was doing a lot of like game server stuff and uploading and being limited by like that 35-40 meg cap. It uploads faster than DSL and cellular, but it's just not, when you're trying to upload an hour-long gameplay or something, super long. So yeah, I mean, I worked in healthcare during COVID, slowly getting out of it just because it's a very
it sounds like a lot.
Field.
Yeah,
it's a toxic field, and I mean, I've had a lot of social media accounts in the past that have grown to well over 100,000 followers on different platforms. So decided to get out of healthcare and make that jump into more or less like social media networking. IT, which is where I love to be.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, definitely welcome to the creator space. Sounds like you're doing really well here. And it sounds like that was kind of the genesis behind getting this Gig Pro. Like you're hosting servers, you're utilizing the internet to its fullest potential, and you wanted to upgrade to the next level. So for people who may be unfamiliar, can you lay the stage for us? What is Xfinity Gig Pro?
So Gigabit Pro it's the biggest tier that a residential customer can possibly get. It is based off of their Metro E or Metro Ethernet. It is dedicated fiber. You're tapped right into the backbone. If you were to do a trace route to any website, you're going to see Comcast iBone. They have private fiber that basically handles all the routing. You're being tapped right into that. Most people, if you're on a cable plan, they're on the HFC, the hybrid fiber coax, and it's shared. Coax goes from the house up to the pole and gets terminated into the MUX, and then from there, it is what it is. It's the slowest speed. So Gigabit Pro is the fastest speed someone can get through Xfinity without making that jump over to a business account.
And Austin, real quick, give the audience a little rundown on why Gigabit Pro specifically is different from your run-of-the-mill, think like Verizon, Fios, or other things, because I'm sure you mentioned some terms that they probably...
So, like Fios, AT&T, another term is GPON. Basically, it is limited in capacity. If you're, say, in a metro area, or you're in a city, I'm not in a big city, but I'm in a city, and we have Comcast and we have Windstream. Windstream is that GPON technology. It's basically super easy to get. They just stick it in and run it to your house, and it could be capped. It's shared. You're not guaranteed the speeds. You usually have some sort of bandwidth cap just because of how much is shared throughout all the city. So this is a little bit different as in the sense that it's dedicated. It's actually private, as it's called, and you have no data caps. It's unmetered. It's definitely on the enterprise level, but at residential pricing.
That is sweet. This sounds like, as Dennis would put it, the God tier internet plan.
Yes, I use the name whenever I'm in an online chat talking to someone. I say I have the Giga Chat of internet.
You most definitely do, my friend. I do got to also bring up and ask, because I wanted to hear this behind the show, but I've wanted you to wait until now. You were saying earlier that you actually host a couple websites. Is that being ran off this Gig Pro setup, and can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yes, so I actually created a social media and brand management company to help influencers and creators like ourselves. And we host a lot of their websites. Some of them, they even have their own applications that we help host. And it's being 100% ran off of the Gigabit Pro system. You know, we could spend $5, $6, $7, or even $800 to go through like OVH to rent a dedicated server. Why not just host it here? You have physical access. You have access to land without setting up like a VPN tunnel into it. And the nice thing is, you are basically your own provider.
Very cool. Very cool. So it
Pretty
sounds like this goes hand in hand with your brand management company, where you can offer services for creators and growing their online influence. And also, hey, if you want a website, boom, we can host that for you and provide a little bit more of a custom tailored experience to meet their needs.
Exactly. We bring the costs down tremendously. Instead of outsourcing all of that, we can keep it in-house, keep the costs low, and, you know, we haven't had any issues with it, you know, because we manage everything. Basically, Comcast handles the routing and the throughput limiting. Pretty much, we never have to contact them for any sort of support. And that is the nice thing about it, you know?
Yeah, that's what you want, Austin. That's what you want, 100%.
So we can do all the website stuff in-house here. We can do the staging and development branches of those sites. We use cPanel. cPanel is one that we use. So we use cPanel, and we have a rack downstairs with Dell C6100 servers. Basically, it's a 2U server with 4 blades, and there are 4 separate dedicated servers in one block. So we're actually working on transferring all of those to fiber. The only fiber connection is from the Juniper to the Ubiquity, which is basically our router, our endpoint router, and then to our NOC system here. But we're working on actually getting the 10 gig fiber switches upstairs and downstairs to make everything the 10 gig possible.
Wow.
You are literally speaking my language. I'm also a Ubiquity Dream Machine Pro owner with
I got
10 gig
UDMP,
LAN setup.
Yep, I'm looking at the aggregation switch to get an extra like 7 or 8.
Sweet. Well,
But there, you know, in this, I didn't really advertise any of this as much as I have been until AT&T Fiber decided to roll out with their 2 and 5 gig packages, which I think is going to be putting the burden on Xfinity to increase the speeds once again.
So, Austin, tell me, Stetson, the audience, like, tell us about the setup process. Like, what do we have to do if we want to get Gig Pro?
So you basically from the start of get the idea, I want it, till, hey, it's installed. Basically go through that process?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to start the process off, you can maybe look online through Xfinity.com. They may list it under internet only at the very bottom. They may not. It's best to call the 1-800-XFinity number. And then you're probably going to get transferred at least for a 6-5, X amount number of times, because even most of their sales reps don't know what Gig Pro is. The Gig Pro team, there's only 4 people nationwide that handles it.
Wow.
So when you call, you got to say, hey, I'm interested in the Gigabit Pro plan. They are coming out with a new name for it called Gigabit X3. So it could maybe help alleviate this issue, because they may think you're meaning just gig. But if you explain it's the fiber service, I want to talk to the Gig Pro team, they'll send you over to them during normal business hours. I want to make that clear. Don't be calling at midnight, because they're not going to answer. And you say, hey, I'm interested. They're going to take down all your information, and they're practically the secretaries and liaisons from Comcast Enterprise and the fiber team to Xfinity, which is residential. Xfinity is residential, Comcast is business. And there is this bridge. Basically, this bridge is the fine difference between you're staying a residential customer, but you're getting that business product, that enterprise product. Then they'll contact you in about a week or 2, set up a site survey. They're going to come out. They're going to actually take meters and walk the actual path from your place of the site of install to basically the MUX, which is where they can splice you into that fiber. And then that's where they're going to see, because they only cover, I believe it's $8,800 of the cost, or 1,100 feet. I believe it's 1,100 feet from the MUX to your house. And as long as it's an aerial installation, which means from pole to house, you don't dig underground, they'll cover up to $8,800 of it. And if you get approved, then they're going to go to the permitting. Luckily, my city didn't need a permit to run it from pole to pole because I'm not in a major busy town. So it was like, do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
So they'll run it. They'll actually get a contractor to come out. They'll run the fiber, and then it's just going to sit there for like a month. I was lucky. It sat there for 2 weeks just sitting there with silicone in the wall. It's like, okay. Then they come and they basically put in this rack mount housing unit so that way it can't get pulled out. And they make their splice into like usable OM3 LC ports. You can just plug it in, and it's usable fiber.
Yeah.
Then once that goes through, they're going to engineer it on the background because you get 2 static IP addresses, 2 separate connections. They need to do all the routing from the head end where your fiber starts at to where it ends. And then that's when they come in with the Juniper and actually do the install and activation. So
wow.
it could be anywhere from a 3-month up to, like me, a 16-month process. But I also did mine during COVID, which really put a hindrance on things with everyone working from home in those early months.
Yeah, so it's not like I'm going to sign up for Xfinity, call someone, they're there like the next day, give you a little box and your copper coax cable, and you're good to go. This is like a full-blown team, land surveying involved,
Yes.
and then you're getting your own dedicated fiber run specifically for you. So, Austin, if your neighbor wanted this, they would also need to do this whole process and get their own separate run. Is that right?
Correct, yes, because the way fiber works is there's different channels of wavelength, and this is to make sure that no one was to cross wavelengths and accidentally intercept data they're not supposed to. It's basically your own highway they're making. And which circles back to what we just talked about, is how I said about Windstream and GPON technology. I did get Windstream just to test it out because I'm that guy. If it's new, I'm going to test it. It was a gig down, gig up, 50 a month, 55 a month. But I called the next day, no joke. They're at the doorstep and they're running fiber.
Wow.
But it's way different because that's shared. The speeds was inconsistent. I've had no issues. We had a tornado warning today, and all the lines were swinging about and whatnot. No issues on the internet. 100% uptime.
Yeah, but your power probably went out.
Shockingly, no. We lucked out.
I only say that because I'm assuming you have West Penn power like I do.
Yes. Yes,
Yep.
we do. Yep.
Anyway, but here's the thing for comparison, because I saw someone ask about the pricing. Just so
Yes.
people have perspective, Gig Pro, because you have to rent the Juniper as well, costs $320 per month. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so this is where it gets a little tricky. So, and I actually just called Comcast Xfinity today to talk about this. So it is $299.95. Let's just say $300 a month. It's $300 a month. There is the modem / router fee. They give you the Juniper in addition to the Netgear R8000. It's just a crappy Wi-Fi router, but to them it's golden. I'm going to check out because when I called in, they claim if I return this Netgear router, they'll knock off that $20 a month fee. I'm like, okay, cool. And then there's like $6 in fees. They did come out with the affordable connectivity program. If for some reason you qualify for ACP, you also get $30 off.
Interesting. What are like the retail values of the rental equipment?
So it varies. So they give you a Juniper ACX 2100.
Yeah.
With the Juniper ACX 2100, if I was to go through Juniper and buy it outright, it's about $8,000 to $9,000.
Holy smokes.
If I was to go on eBay and buy it from, like, I don't know, a company that bought them and oversold, you can pick them up for like $1,600. And our 8000 router is like $150. I did want to say there is a $1,000 setup and activation fee. There's a $500 install
Holy
fee and a
smokes.
$500 activation fee.
Hold on, but wait, there's more.
There's
And I know this because I looked into it. If you fall outside that whole qualifying thing, for example, Austin mentioned aerial setups. If it's an underground setup, you have to pay the construction, which for someone like myself is $20,000.
And I will say they did change that. I just found out last month on Reddit because I started up the Comcast Gigabit Pro subreddit for all of us who were interested. And I have heard through multiple people that they used to say, oh, your install fee is, I don't know, 18,000. We'll knock off the 8,800. You only owe us 10,000. They don't do that now. If you do not qualify with that $8,800 limit, you got to pay the whole amount. They will not even knock off that allocation. Yeah, you're shaking your head. I'm sure you heard that, saw that.
This is
Listen,
nuts.
the whole reason is because when I picked my house, I picked it because I had Fios and Comcast available. When I got Fios for the first 6 months, it was horrendous. Thankfully, a unicorn happened, a maintenance truck happened. They fixed it, and it's been absolutely god tier, legendary. But during that time period, because the uptime was literally like low 90%, which you can greatly appreciate what that means, I was considering the possibility of getting Gig Pro. That being said, I do got to ask. You said you tested Windstream, which you said is about $50 versus $320. Honestly, like, is Gig Pro really justifiable? Like, if you weren't doing things that would break terms of service for a residential customer, is Gig Pro actually justifiable for you? Like,
I mean, for a normal house, no, I do not. I would not recommend it, being honest, unless you absolutely need it. Windstream, fun fact about Windstream is they picked up the contract to handle all the backbone routing for Armstrong Cable. They now handle, it used to be CenturyLink, which bought Layer 3 out of Pittsburgh, and it is now Windstream. Verizon used to cover like Cranberry Township, which was the very businessy neighborhood of Pittsburgh. It used to be Verizon Fios. No longer. It's 100% Windstream now for them. So Windstream, I will say, the speeds were as advertised. However, the uptime was very sketchy, and I kept trying to get a static IP address, which, here's the difference. You can get a static IP address for Windstream as a residential customer. You cannot do that as a normal Xfinity customer. So $55 compared to this $325. If you're a family who works, kids go to school, and you just use it for nighttime, I would go the Windstream route. If you're going and doing content creation full time, if you're doing hosting, if you need the actual speeds, I would say go with the Gig Pro, because one thing I do want to say, and I found this out, is Google, YouTube, Microsoft, Amazon, if you're using like their front end website to like upload something like OneDrive, they limit your upload speed to 800 megabits anyways.
it's actually less.
Is it less? Yeah.
It's
so
Google Cloud, Google Drive. It specifically caps roughly around like 350, 300.
wow, it used to be 800. So now, like, basically you can only upload to that. If you have multiple pipes, like we do with multiple services going on, hosting multiple things, that's why we have it, is because we can actually use it to its fullest capacity.
So it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong here, Austin, but it sounds like one single task would not saturate this highway that Xfinity is built for you. Like, you would not use a single 3 gigabit per second connection, but rather the use case is you have like a 10 or 20 lane highway where you've got multiple things going on the network at the same time, and this extra bandwidth just allows all of those to go at full speed at 100% uptime. Is that correct?
That is correct. Basically, if we want to bring up the term load balancing, basically this speed eliminates the need for load balancing because it's readily available. Back then, you would have to have load balancing with quality of service and do all this routing, at the router side. Now, just because the speed's available, you don't need load balancing.
So, Austin, I have a quick question. Comcast and most ISPs tend to over-provision, and I know that with Gig Pro...
10%. 10% for Comcast.
But I know with Gig Pro specifically, it's two things. So you got the 3 gig main. They provision to like an SFP plus port, and then you got your typical RJ45 1 gig connection. What is your total throughput that you're getting with this Gig Pro connection? Is it pushing 5 gigs?
So, yes, and I will say just on the fiber, it's weird because if I was to do like a speed test in a way to Comcast business servers, it actually goes up to 6 gigs, sometimes 10 gigs, and then bottles neck down once it realizes what's happening. I can pull close, like you said, that 4500 to 5 gig due to the over provisioning. Like right now, I could probably do a speed test and pull 3500 just on this computer. And then, theoretically, if I was, and again, I will say this, I don't know how maybe changing those over to 2.5 gig ports on the Ethernet side, how that could possibly even affect it more. The Juniper is a very powerful machine.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. What is the latency looking like? Since it's literally like you're directly plugged into the head end, like there's no nodes that you're literally sharing anything with. Like, are you getting like a legit 0 ping time essentially because it's so low?
So the way my connection works is it goes from me, and I believe they changed the head end down to McKeesport. It was to random, so it's now down in McKeesport, and then it hits over to out near Pittsburgh Airport at their building. From me to that block through McKeesport to Pittsburgh is 4 milliseconds. Now, if a server is hosted in Pittsburgh with like Cloudflare or something, it stays in Pittsburgh. If not, it bounces out of Ashburn, Virginia. So it either terminates at Pittsburgh or terminates in Virginia. From here to Virginia is 8 milliseconds. From here to Pittsburgh is 4. So I don't see anything greater than 9 or 10 on a heavy day.
Hey, I got a pretty good question for you, and you might be able to answer this one for me. So you were talking about earlier. So Armstrong uses Windstream as their tier 1 ISP that they're plugging into for the backbone. I was wondering if you might happen to know who Verizon is plugging into for their backbone, like who their main peering agreement arrangement is with, since Verizon doesn't have that much fiber in Pennsylvania.
I don't know up here. I would say down south it is Cogent. I'm almost positive it is Cogent. Level 3 is no longer really around. They've changed all of that. It seems like Cogent or Hurricane Electric is going to be the top 2 from what I've seen. Windstream, that shocked me when I saw that. I was like, wow, okay.
That is interesting. The reason why I asked is because Verizon is notorious for bad ping agreements, and it's noticeable in the ping times. Like, if we were to ping that Pittsburgh Comcast server, you do it on the Verizon connection, you're getting like 20 milliseconds. Obviously, if you do it on Comcast, it's like 6. But if you do it on someone like Armstrong, it's like 7. Like,
Windstream is very shockingly, their wholesale, which is their backbone and routing, their wholesale is good.
Side note, the reason why I'm familiar with Armstrong is I had to deal with them, and I actually do have a static IP address from them still to this day at my parents' house for free. It's because we got it for free, so it's like grandfathered in.
Well, and that's the thing. I tried to get a 29 block of 5 usable IPs for Gig Pro. Unfortunately, it is not available.
2.
Yeah, it's just 2. However, as a business customer, I did find out you can order 5 additional IPs for free.
Oh, that's interesting.
I did find that out. They were going to provision it for me, but then they're like, yes, your equipment can handle it, but you're unfortunately not a business customer.
Do you know what the difference is between the business plan and the Gig Pro plan? Like, is there a comparable entry-level business plan, and it's just like way more expensive, or?
My plan right now for 3 or 4 gig symmetrical through Metro E is about $2,400 to $2,700. But you get a service level agreement, which guarantees uptime. You get the online portal. You can make your own tickets. You can actually set up BGP tunneling. You can create mitigation for DDoS attacks. You can do all of that. Me, if I need to do any of that, typically, yeah, they'll do it for me, but I have to call operational security or the network ops center, which is the Metro E team, and basically beg and plead with them. Hey.
Yeah.
Hey,
Interesting.
like, I asked them to set up a PTR record, and normally as a business customer, I could log in and set up that reverse DNS record instantly. I had to create a ticket and get it in 72 hours.
Hey, so I thought of 2 good questions.
Okay.
1, what does your typical data usage look like per month? I'm just curious.
I don't like pulling up my phone whenever doing a podcast, but I want to tell you, I got this installed again on March 9th because I found out they upgraded the speeds and everything, and there was major billing issues on my old account, so they set it all up. If I take a look at data usage right here, since March 9th, upload has been 15.5 terabytes.
Holy smokes, Austin.
Download has been about 6.4 terabytes.
See, the reason I was asking is because I'm currently doing a little test now that my Verizon's finally where I'm trying to see how unlimited no data cap is for Verizon. I am just shy of 20 terabytes so far.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I did want to say this because I assume you have audiences all over the place. The Northeast division of Comcast actually won. They actually won against a lawsuit. So there's no data caps in Northeast Comcast.
Wait, they did what in a lawsuit? I'm sorry?
So what happened was there was some disagreements going on with customers, and basically the people in the West and Central and South U.S. was basically trying to say they're going to sue Comcast because they have to pay $50 a month for unlimited data to get rid of their 1.2 terabyte data cap.
Small correction. It is 30 now, and if you rent their gateway, they have a little thing where it's included for 25.
So it was 50, and then they dropped it down to the 30, and then 25 if you do the X-Fi modem.
Right.
Okay.
It's 30 if you have your own equipment. It's $25, and you get the modem rental plus unlimited data for the 25.
Oh, well, actually, that's way cheaper then, because before it was 50, and that was very expensive. But basically, the Northeast, that division of Comcast basically said they could upkeep and still have that no data cap. The people at Comcast were mad, but Comcast won in the end. Said, nope, we're going to keep no data.
Interesting.
Limits, yeah.
So, Austin, what provider were you coming from before you got the Gig Pro?
Oh, goodness. So I actually had just posted this on Reddit about my story. So I lived in a county next to me now, which doesn't have Comcast at all. And I was on CenturyLink for it was a T1 basically, 1.5 megs down and half a meg up. Yeah.
Ooh.
So as I was younger, I basically got T-Mobile on my phone, and they had come out with a $25 a month plan for unlimited tethering and hotspot usage. So I was using that, doing it through the computer. Mind you, I was younger at that time. Went through different hiccups with that. I was basically stuck to hotspotting. Well, I decided, I'm going to go with AT&T Small Business. I got 6 hotspots. I put 3 in one room. I put 3 in another room, and I had 2 cell boosters, one with the Yagi to that cell tower, one with the Yagi to that. I combined all 6 over Ethernet because they were the little neck gear ones that had an RJ45 port. Stuck it into a PepLink load balancer, combined 6 WANs into one output, and I started pulling almost 600 megs down and 200, 300 megs up. I'm like, I'm loving this. A week later, I get a call from AT&T at Operational Security saying, you're draining these cell towers in the mesh network. You're using too much data. What are you doing? Later that year, I moved out of county, got the regular gig plan through Xfinity.
Wait, I need to rewind for a second. What piece of equipment exactly were you using that had 6 WAN ports?
I think it actually went up to 8. It was a PepLink. It was a PepLink Core Balance 1. PepLink Core Balance 1, and it was a $99 license to change it from 2 WANs to, I believe, 8 WANs. It was 6 or 8 WANs. It was a PepLink Balance Core 1.
I'm looking this up right now. So you can score one of those puppies for, it looks like about $380.
Wow, I paid $140 for mine.
I'm looking at Amazon. That's interesting.
It even got worse than that. What I did then is, as it came out, it went into a Ubiquiti Edge, a mini Edge X router, which was like this big, and I sent it up a 40-foot pole. And when I did that, I put it on a Ubiquiti dish, and I broadcasted that out to all my neighbors who were stuck on this T1 and gave them high-speed internet. Yeah.
So wait, that actually leads me on to my second question I was going to ask you earlier.
Okay, well, good.
With your Gigabit Pro, what would stop you from just reselling that internet?
I mean, technically there is... I mean, hey, you want to pull legal? Yeah, they could pull that legal, terminate your connection and all of that, but being caught is another thing. I mean, there have been people that do that. If you look on Ubiquity forums, the WISP forums, the wireless ISPs. I mean, I did it with AT&T. I shouldn't have. I mean,
Statute of limitations, they can't get you.
Right? I've thought about doing it for some of my neighbors, you know, like the low-income people. I've thought about doing it because Ubiquity stuff is pretty cheap now, but I'm like... Well, Windstream came in the area, no credit checks. I don't mean that in any bad way, but like, they're offering fiber for $50 a month. That's insane. And with the ACP, that takes it down to $20 a month for 1 gig.
And that's gig for 50, yeah?
Gig symmetrical, you know?
That's really, really
that
good.
That is, dude, that's better. Listen, that is so much better than what Fios. You know what? Do you want to know what Verizon Fios charges now for their gig?
Wasn't it $99 for the longest time?
So it was $89.99, and then with your discount, $80.
Okay.
Now it's $100 per month, but there's discounts, of course, that bring it down a little bit. But still, $100 for gig is pretty expensive.
And now,
all
if you
things
look,
considered.
AT&T is 5 gig symmetrical for $180 a month. But
I know.
But I did look at their terms on their one ad because, thank you, Google, for your tracking cookies. I looked at the terms. It said that offer and that plan of service can be revoked at any time, which means that if their system starts to get overloaded in a city, they could say, oh, 5 gigs no longer available, bounce you down to 2, which is nice because with Comcast, with this Gigabit Pro, I signed a 2-year contract. They can't do anything to my plan for 2 years. They can't say, oh, Gig Pro's no longer available.
That is not true. If you actually read Comcast's very, very, very tiny fine print, even if you're in a contract, they can still make certain changes to your plan, including termination of that plan if they so chose.
Really?
Yes.
Because I knew if you obviously break the TOS or AUP, you know, they could, nope, bye, you know.
No,
Wow.
I'll give you a good example. Okay. This is a positive one, but it's an example. So you know how Comcast does a yearly speed increases pretty much virtuously for the past.
Oh,
because
they just came out with the 1.2, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Comcast didn't have to ask anybody for consent to change your plan and your speed tier in that example, right? They just did it. And that's a positive. That's a win.
That's a good one.
But
But
on the reciprocant side of things, you know how Comcast also raised their modem rental even though you were in a contract with a 2-year price lock? But you still got the increased cost of the modem rental because equipment taxes and fees and other charges may be subject to change during your promotion or term agreement.
Basically that contract is just for them to get an ETF, an early termination fee, basically.
So basically what their contract boils down to is you get to agree upon a price on the base service. So whatever that is, like $80, $90, whatever. Anything on top of that is subject to change, and that includes also speeds. Like again, usually the speed thing is like for like the positive, but still, like everything about it is applicable to change. Your side of things as a consumer is you're basically saying, Comcast, I'm going to stick with you for this amount of time, and if I leave, I'll pay $10 per month for every month I had left in the contract, or whatever the print is, because I know on the business side it's way different than consumer, but that's basically the shtick. Comcast says, we'll give you this price for X amount of time. You say, I'm going to be with you for this amount of time.
Very curious. Very curious. Yeah, these big companies. Sometimes can't trust them.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, they're always putting a stick to people.
Yeah.
But listen, real quick, this is where I come in with my spicy topic. This wasn't planned, but I'm going to ask you something. What are your thoughts on data caps? Do you think ISPs are justified with them?
I think a lot of it is area specific. I mean, ultimately, I think that they should be having 100 gig multi-mode fiber coming in for a whole city and then going off of that, so there's no issues. I lived in an area that was congested where people couldn't even get that T1 anymore. I think that you do run into abusive users, unfortunately, who sit there, they're doing their torrenting, they're on a I can't say anything. I plead the fifth on that, but there are abusive users who pull away from other people. For example, with hosting, we do hosting for outside clients who maybe don't do brand management with ViralScore, but will host their website. If they have PHP extensions running constantly and it's taking up that CPU usage, that's going to be an issue, because at the end of the day, that one person is affecting 40, 50, 60 other people. What's going to be cheaper? Losing 40, 50, 60 people, or just saying goodbye to one customer? So, I think that the data cap shouldn't be a hard data cap. I think that it should be carrier specific.
So here's my hot take, and let's see how closely we line up. My hot take is that ISPs already have the best way of controlling for the most expensive part of being ISP, and that's called speed tiers. Realistically speaking, data costs are less than a penny in the bucket for an ISP. Like, it's so incredibly cheap. Like, I know there are costs with the interconnects that they have to pay and all that fun stuff, but a lot of times the interconnect contracts aren't about a necessarily raw number of data. It's about a set throughput that they need to support typically.
Right.
So the most expensive thing for an ISP that they care about is reaching that peak 100% utilization of saturation. That's the expensive thing for them, because that means they have to go in and invest in new equipment. The amount of data that's being used doesn't really affect their costs in any meaningful way. And,
right.
And so my whole thing is, if you're going to sell a speed tier, and I'm paying for a bit rate, if I want to use it all the time, little short bursts, whatever, I pay for the bit rate, let me use it. It's my part as a consumer is give you money. Your part is to ensure as the company that you can provide the service that you're telling me that you can provide. It's not my problem if you oversubscribed your node by 1,000 subscribers, betting on the fact that no one would use it and there wouldn't be someone like me on your node. Like, that's my kind of look at things.
No, I completely agree. I mean, my friend who has Armstrong Cable, I was shocked that he still had data cap. They charge $10 per 50 gigs over that. $10 per 50 gigs. And he was at 1.5 terabytes. So I said, $10 per 50 gigs, just give him 15 more a month, get double the speed, and you go to 2.5 terabytes, which I think is still BS, you know?
Hold on. Wait, Austin, can I give you a little history check on Armstrong real quick?
Sure.
All right, cool. So back in the day, I used to actually pay for what Armstrong called Zoom Enterprise Internet. And if you remember, that was like $300 back in the day. And that was for a 50 by 5 megabit connection. And there was no data caps back then. But then Armstrong finally went away from being analog and implemented DOCSIS 3.0. And we started seeing beautiful speed tiers, and I went back to being like a normal residential customer. Great. But that's when I found out they had a data cap. The reason I found out is because I built a PC in 2013 and started downloading all the Windows updates and the Steam things. And back then, the data caps were tiny. I don't know if you remember, but like Zoom Basic or whatever they called it only had like 150 gigabyte cap.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. That was my aunt. That was during my aunt's day when I knew.
Hold on. But Zoom normal had 300, and I think the highest data cap there was a terabyte, and that was if you were on like Zoom 4 or whatever they ended up renaming it.
Zoom Blast or whatever, yeah.
Yeah. So I had Zoom 4, obviously, and I blew past a terabyte. But back then, Armstrong wasn't like $10 per month. That policy didn't exist. It was like, here's your one warning. You go over this, no more internet for you. The adding of the $10 per month additional, that didn't come until like another year later. And that was actually, I know it's crazy to think about, but that was a win, because at least you didn't just lose your internet. Because as you know, Armstrong only services the most rural parts of Pennsylvania. They really are the only option unless you want like dial-up.
Exactly. Bingo. Yeah, no, That was definitely back in the day that they did that, and they came out with that. If I recall, when they changed all these tiers, did that $10 per 50 gig and increased it. It was when they were complaining about people with their DVR systems, with their home security camera streaming. They said you shouldn't be streaming your cameras. That was, I remember that they put out a little message there.
Yeah.
It was about people streaming.
My goodness.
So I see some comments coming in. I would love to hear what everybody thinks. Someone was saying if you host the Debo Pop. First off, I didn't forget you, by the way, Debo Pop. But he said if you need to host a server, get a business plan. Now, the reason why I take a problem with this fine print and legalese is because anything technically can be considered a server just about nowadays. My PC could be considered a server if I'm hosting like a private Minecraft lobby, and this is the thing that it's running on. My Plex, I know this has Plex the server in the name, but my NAS, which also is a Plex server, could be considered a server even if I'm only doing things via LAN and not necessarily streaming things outside of my network, but by definition it is a server.
It's a server.
So my problem is the internet today is a lot different. Like, to me, okay, basically what I'm saying in way too many words is this. The difference between a residential customer and a business customer has less to do with speed or what we do, but it's the specific features that we need, i.e.
Yes.
You mentioned it earlier, Austin, things like DDoS protection, static IP addresses, BGP tunneling,
DNS.
direct connections between different facilities. Like, that should be the difference maker. That should be what and the service level agreement.
I was going to say the SLA. Yeah, that's a big one, is SLA.
That's what you should be paying for. Don't punish the residential customer for using speed. Like, it makes no, like if you're going to sell 5 gig, because you were touching on that too, what's the point of selling 5 gig if you can only use like 1.2 terabytes? I know AT&T doesn't have that, but I'm just saying, like, what's the point?
Right, exactly.
Like if you do the math, I think someone that has a gigabit connection, if they went full bore for like 30 days, could use something like 80 terabytes or something like that in a month easy. If they just went full bore, it might have been more. I might be remembering wrong. In fact, that sounds too low because I think you average like 10 terabytes per day, so I'm definitely lowballing it. But point being, like, these data caps are arbitrary. They're money grabs, and they don't really solve the core of the problem that's expensive to the ISP.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Austin, I have a question for you. There are some other providers out there who will provide internet that's greater than a gigabit per second. We're looking at, I think, Frontier, AT&T, Google Fiber. They all have options. Are any of those other providers, do they offer something that would have met your needs? Or is Xfinity's Gig Pro plan really the only option that met your needs?
I mean, the best one, if I could get a provider, it's $70 a month in Switzerland. And it's a symmetrical unmetered 25 gig plan.
Holy smokes.
It's 69. I think it's like $69.80 a month. I looked it up, and it's insane for like $700.
So we're moving to Switzerland. That's what I'm hearing.
But if we're talking in the United States, I'm not too familiar with Frontier. I believe it's a West Virginia. Around me, it's more of a West Virginia thing and maybe part of Ohio. Unfortunately, Xfinity and Windstream are the only two that are up here, and also a local fiber company called SolvesGiver.
What about GoNet Speed?
I've never heard of them.
Okay, we'll talk later. I'm sorry. Go ahead, continue.
No, you're fine. In SolvesGiver, their website looks like it has been updated since 1992. I'm not going with
that's always a red flag for me too.
Craigslist has a better theme now than they do. But besides the point, I was stuck between Windstream and Comcast. And Windstream, I liked them, but the only issue I had is I couldn't get the static IP after I kept calling. And I also found out, maybe this is just me, it was a pay-as-you-go monthly basis thing. No contract, pay-as-you-go. Well, I quit the service, and for 2 months, I still was being billed for it, but they would not let me use it. I'm still being billed for it for the months you don't use it. Their customer service is like CenturyLink. It's very horrible. That's why I was like, I'm going to go back with Xfinity just because I can. And that also brings up, you can get a discount if you switch your phones to Xfinity Mobile, which is a reseller of Verizon. So you can kind of even out on that, because I think it's $10 a month you get off for having Comcast. Is that
Yeah, you get a pretty good deal, and I think it sometimes changes. Like, I think you get like $30 off the regular residential gigabit plan, and I think you might get like, I don't know, as you mentioned, $10 off your lines for Xfinity Mobile.
Hey,
Yeah.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. And I just saw one of these comments saying about you need 60 or 7
Oh yeah,
Wi-Fi to enjoy those speeds over Wi-Fi. I
yeah.
do
What is your Wi-Fi setup? That's a great question.
It's horrible right now. I need to switch it. Everything's hardwired. The only thing is my phone, and it's a Samsung. So no, I need to get a Ubiquiti. I'm looking at getting a Ubiquiti AC Pro just to try it out. I haven't used their Wi-Fi, but most devices you won't see over 500-600. You may get a gig on a phone, but anything over a gig, you're most likely not going to see on Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the TLDR is Wi-Fi is finicky. You basically need a lab environment to get past the gig reliably and consistently. And I would say I'll be extra favorable. I'll say 700 is feasible if all things are right in a household setting with Wi-Fi 6.
Correct.
Yeah,
And
I think on Wi-Fi 6, I've gotten around 800 megabits per second as the peak. I think that was on Pixel 6. And I think for most of the other tests, it was like between 500 and 700 on the Galaxy phones.
And one thing I do want to just quickly touch on, since we're talking about Wi-Fi, is I think a lot of people are being sold on fluff with mesh network systems, because I don't believe that they're fully understanding when it goes from one mesh node to another and they extend this, that's actually cutting the throughput speeds down. And so we see a lot of tickets, we see a lot of Reddit posts saying, well, I bought this $600 Wi-Fi mesh system, I'd pay for a gig or whatever, and I'm only getting 200 megs at the end. You know, I don't think
Can you
it's
explain that a little bit more? Like, is each node specifically sort of splitting that bandwidth? So if you have
typically
a
in half. At least on Ubiquiti, like they came out with their Alien system. They used to plug in. I love that system, but the way that it was explained to me in the documentation that came with it is that basically every node it jumps from in that mesh, it cuts that speed down by half just for that simultaneous throughput from one node to the next to the next.
I'd
Do
like
you
to
know,
chime
Dennis?
in.
Do you
I'd
know?
like to chime in on this because it's
Please,
definitely my area of expertise.
yeah, please.
So basically, the way a mesh system works, okay, is it's doing Wi-Fi to connect your devices, but it also needs to use that same Wi-Fi as the backhaul when you're doing it in a wireless setup. That's the reason why your speeds are cut in half, because now if you had a channel that was, say, theoretical transmit of 4800, 2400 of that is being used for your backhaul, which then gets cut down actually a half again. So it's actually a fourth because it's in half a duplex for your downloading your upstream, which is why if you're gonna do a mesh setup, absolutely stay away from dual band. This is the one time where tri-band actually has a real meaningful benefit. But ultimately, if you're going to do a mesh setup, what you should really be doing is just getting multiple access points, hardwiring them in with Ethernet, and then setting it up in that manner, which is why I'm also a fan of Ubiquiti with those beautiful access points. By the way, I have 2 of the lights and 1 in the LR. I'm sad I didn't wait for the pros.
So hardwiring the access point solves the backhaul issue because it's
Right.
using the hardwire as the backhaul.
Yes.
And so then it's probably just a matter of placing them far enough apart that you expand your coverage without causing too much interference between the different access points.
You can have too many access points, and
Yeah.
that also causes problems. And also, there are other factors that can impact your Wi-Fi performance that are just strictly out of your control, i.e. if you live by an airport, right, you're not going to have access to the full suite of the 5 gigahertz available channels because some of those DF channels are going to automatically be turned off by your router thanks to the radars that are nearby at the airport. That's just like a whole security thing. And it's just, they're smart like that. They'll turn it off. It won't be available to you. And also, if you live in like an apartment complex or a townhome, your neighbor's Wi-Fi is also going to be providing interference on your channels, which is why you'll always hear people say, stay off of 2.4 gigahertz, because I believe, if I remember correctly, there's only 3 potential channels that you can actually select that are unique on the 2.4 gigahertz band that don't overlap. Everything else overlaps and causes insane interference. Wi-Fi 5 gigahertz has more channels available, but because so many people think like they'll go into their router and they'll think like, I'm going to make this 160 megahertz wide. You end up getting a lot of interference because with the 160 megahertz, there's only 2 configurations for that, and you're going to be overlapping on a bunch of other people's stuff. That's why when we got that 6 gigahertz spectrum, Stetson, I was very excited. However, 6 gigahertz has its own host of problems due to the power of the transmission, in which basically it requires line of sight, essentially, for it to be viable, because the moment you go behind another wall or something, and again, this comes back down to power, normal 5 gigahertz ends up performing better. So
there you go. It sounds like Wi-Fi is typically not the move. So in Austin, it sounds like you're hardwired in for everything. You got what is it? The fiber directly into the equipment that you're renting from Xfinity, and then just your Cat 6 cables running to all your gear in your house.
8. Cat
Whoa, 8. Cat 8.
Wait. Doesn't Cat 8 not use RJ45 anymore?
The ones that I have do use RJ45, but I have seen some that don't.
Because I was going to say Cat 8, I thought Cat 8, if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, memory is telling me that specification for Cat 8 is theoretical max of 40 gigabit per second
Debo Bob's saying Cat 8 is 46 gigabits per second.
Oh, yeah, I think the cabling is the cabling with the shielding is with the pairs are capable of doing that, but obviously the type of connector is going to be your hindrance.
SFP+ is required. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. You can get copper SFP+, I believe, to where you can plug it in. Which I was going to bring up. I do know that Comcast is already working on DOCSIS 4.0 in the lab, and DOCSIS 3.1. I've been hearing it a lot. And this is from the techs as well when they were here. They're looking at possibly coming out with a 2.5 gigabit package for Xfinity Residential that does not require fiber. However, your upload speed is going to be still limited, but
no.
But your download speed is going to possibly hit that. They're looking within the next year. Have you heard that?
I already knew that. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's why I was saying on Sneed Show, like Q3, Q4 of like it's gonna be exciting times. There's a lot that I know about ISPs that I can't say on this show. That includes for fiber providers, by the way, that will make you happy. But yes, I am excited. I'm more excited about the upload enhancements, and I'll talk to you behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But yeah. Although I did think of a question I wanted to ask you. This goes back to what Stetson was asking, which was about any of the ISPs that could fulfill your needs that weren't like Comcast Gig Pro. This was just a thought I personally have, but like, what would have stopped you from either A, just getting multiple like 1 gig symmetrical connections from someone like Windstream or whomever, and doing it like that, like say 2 gigs, right? Because 2 gigs is in my mind plenty, right? And that would only be $100 in this scenario. Or 2, just picking to live somewhere and then getting 2 separate providers, which is what I'm doing because I enjoy the redundancy aspect, but also the extra throughput. Like, why weren't those strategies that you implemented? Like, what? Like,
so that's a good question. And a lot of it comes down to the engineering aspect. There's always load balancing that is available. Load balancing is, but when you come into multiple providers, they're all going to be different IP addresses, which could pose a routing issue unless you were to somehow bond those together or VPN them out into one connection.
There is a way, yeah.
Yeah, there is a way. The most easiest, and again, it's Metro E. It's the best internet one could possibly get. It's Metro E. That was one reason why we were like, you know what? For the peace of mind, I don't want to have to babysit this thing. Like, I just went down to Baltimore and DC and Arlington and New York and Long Island for the week. And I came back. No issues at all. I could log in, check it all. You know, I had no downtime. It was fine for a week.
And I got a better question for you. Now that you've tasted the joy of, as you called it, Chad Internet, could you ever go back to the realm of mortals with typical residential gig?
That's a good question.
That's a very good question. So, I've a little backstory here is I had Gig Pro for 2 months previously. I had it in April and August. I had quit because the first time there was billing issues, they promised they were waiving the $1,000 fee because of the extended issues, which is a story in itself. And then in August, they activated it for one day, but then said, "Oh wait, you didn't pay this bill that was already paid for. We can't reactivate your service." So they came in to deinstall. Finally, I had Comcast waive almost $3,300. They gave me $3,300 in bill credits to cancel out that entire account number and then restart this. So I was on a gig plan for a while, and I will say that the download speed, I mean, I didn't see too much of a noticeable difference, but the upload speed, just sitting there watching it slowly upload YouTube,
Yeah.
I'm like, ugh.
Hurts my soul.
It does, and I couldn't. I mean, I could host some stuff where I was taking a hit to myself, unless it was like a Minecraft server that is small packets. But when you're running into multiple services, I was not going to run any sort of websites because they were heavy hitting websites, big traffic sites. I went to A2 for that. It was like $30 a month. Offload that.
Also, why? I mean, I know this is gonna sound a little silly, but like, why couldn't you have just paid for an off-site server, essentially?
So, for what we do and the specifications, it would be about $700 or $800 per month for the services we need through OVH. And I mean, we host some controversial websites, I'll say. I won't say any names, but we host some controversial ones that made worldwide news, and OVH terminated our contract with them. So, a lot of free speech websites, let me say that. So, having the ability to host it in-house here and handle our abuse complaints directly and not have someone over our head, it takes a load off. Because we, with our sources, we'll hope promote activists and all their causes. And some of them tend to be controversial.
Stetson.
Yeah.
This would not be the Best Phone Plans podcast if we didn't ask our guests the famous age-old question.
Oh, goodness.
It's true. We have
Do you want to hit them
one
with it?
huge question. This is a big one. I think you alluded to this earlier, Austin. Should be pretty easy. But we always ask, what cell phone plan do you have?
I have Verizon right now, actually.
Oh.
I did have AT&T FirstNet.
Okay.
I will say, okay, so let me say that. I did have AT&T FirstNet. I can say from an iPad Pro perspective, out in the rural sticks of Pennsylvania, and I was able to pull 350 megs down and 180 megs up. Yes, in Allegheny County, because I did ride time when I was with, I won't say their name, but I was with an EMS station. I was doing my clinical time with them. I had to pull back my assistant chief from ringing the necks of the AT&T rep. So, in a metro city, I don't like FirstNet, but in the sticks, it's very nice. But now I am with Verizon.
Interesting. And what Verizon plan are you on? Like,
it's $75 a month, I believe, per line. It's not the. I think it's the Do More, or it's something like that. They changed their names, I know.
Yeah. Do you know what perks you're getting? That's usually the best way to tell.
I have hotspot tethering. I don't have the Disney Plus one. I have.
So maybe it's like Do More.
Do More, yeah. It's like $70 or $75 a month. I will say I'm looking at going back to Xfinity Mobile because I'm not looking. I did leave Xfinity Mobile because they're 20. And I'm gonna be honest. After 22 gigs on Xfinity Mobile, you are stuck on a 1.5 meg connection on your phone. Whereas with Verizon, for 50 or 100 gigs, it is. You don't get throttled after that.
Yeah.
So, Austin,
that was pretty good.
There's good news. There's two good things I want to say. One, as far as Xfinity Mobile goes, this was updated on their terms of service, and we talked about that on the I think we talked about it on the show, or I mentioned on Sneed's show. But ultra wideband, which includes C-band, does not account against your high-speed threshold.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
I heard they updated that and said that will be updated in 6 months. But for right now,
is this for MVNOs or is this?
This is specifically for Xfinity Mobile.
Okay, cool. That's why I just wanted to make sure because I actually do. I believe in a UW area. I know at the top of the hill I do. But
I have a decent idea based off our conversations. I have a decent idea of where you're probably at. But yeah, I
Take
probably
the end of 28.
What's up?
The end of 28.
Okay.
So yeah.
But secondarily, the second thing I was gonna say was, and this is more surprising to me, on this show, I became I got a reputation as being like the AT&T fanboy, essentially.
It's true. Dennis is the AT&T fanboy.
I used to be.
So like, I'm actually surprised that you switched to Verizon, because in my mind, Pittsburgh is an AT&T city. Like by that I mean, like, AT&T is so far away as far as like apps, like capacity, generally speaking, and coverage in the Pittsburgh market, that like everyone paled in comparison. Now I know C-band has changed that for Verizon a little bit, but I would love to hear like what your actual like comparable performance was and what made you switch to Verizon overall.
So, it's kind of funny because I did, and again, this is going to get a little murky. So, like in the Fox Chapel area of Pittsburgh, which is on the north side, Verizon was horrible. There was no coverage at all. Okay. AT&T had coverage and T-Mobile had coverage. So that was okay. Then I transitioned over to Westmoreland County for an agency, and I was doing my training with that agency. Whereas where we were, which I don't think it was too rural, it was right next to the highway, we were always there, T-Mobile had coverage. AT&T and Verizon did not have coverage. So I also worked at a healthcare system up north on 80. I won't say their name, but they're up on 80, and the only provider up there was Verizon. And again, where I am still on the books technically as an employee right now, Verizon and them in more or less central PA is Verizon, and that's why I found myself being more in a Verizon area. However, AT&T does have certain areas where they do better in. It's, if there was there is an ability, if you were to dual SIM AT&T and Verizon, that would be the best thing. And it's funny because I saw this one device, and what they did is they combined, when it was Sprint, T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, and it was in a yellow box. And what they did is they had 4 SIMs that would go in, and it would bond the connection into one usable one. And this device was amazing. I don't know, I can't remember the name. I don't know whatever happened to it. It was like 4 or 5 years ago. It combined all 4 SIMs, bonded them into one usable connection over VPN, and you had service basically anywhere in the United States.
I know
That's
what
awesome.
you're talking about because RV Critics mentioned it on our
Yes.
show. But we've reached the hour mark. I want to give you a quick chance, Austin, to maybe plug anything that you want to share with our audience, or anything like that as we begin to wind down the show.
I mean, honestly, with the Gigabit Pro, it's an amazing plan for if you have a case use that needs it. I wouldn't be fretting over it if you can't get it. I wouldn't be fretting over it if you can't afford it. It's good product, but you have to have a use for it. That is the big thing. And if you do luck out and get it, because only 0.02% of people in Comcast market area can actually get it, it's a very long process to get. You got to be very patient, and I mean, it's just it's real crappy. But once it's in, it's good. It's fine for the most part. But no, I mean, honestly, I appreciate you guys having me on here to talk about it. It can be a little muddy, with all the tech lingo for the non-tech savvy people.
But no, I thought it was a great show, Austin.
And the other thing is make sure your network can sustain that speed, because if everything's at 1 gig speed, think of it as plumbing. If you have 1 inch coming in, but then you only got half-inch or a quarter-inch pipe going out, you're not going to get the full 1 inch of water. And that's your switches and everything. So be mindful of that, because I kind of am running into that issue now, trying to get the switches.
We will definitely be talking more about this. I can assure you on that.
Oh, for
at some
sure.
point.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for going through the setup and installation process, paying that $1,000 basically setup fee to get this product, to share with the world what it's like having it, how you're utilizing it and leveraging it and making it part of your viral store company as a offering for creators. And for going deep into the weeds in some of these awesome topics. I really loved it. So Austin, thank you so much for your time. Any other things you want to shout out, like where people can check you out on the internet or where they can find ViralSoar? I can throw a link to that right now in the chat.
Viralsoar.com. That's going to be our big one. We actually have the fiber web hosting. I will say real quick that we are, as ViralSoar, also an official partner of speedtest.net. We actually host a service. We host a server through Speedtest, which accommodates to some of that near 16 terabytes of upload. Forgot to mention that. It's nothing fancy. It's on a 1 gig port right now. We actually have that using our 1 gig port, that 3-in-1. We're going to get that on the 3 gig though. So that's going to be something to look for.
That's sweet.
It's definitely interesting. Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Austin. I linked to the YouTube channel. We'll put ViralSoar in the video description so people can check it out. Thank you again for joining. And take care and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah. Peace out,
All
guys.
Right. Take care, guys.